This is a WMUR Commitment 2020 special in partnership with the New Hampshire Institute of Politics. Conversation with the candidate. Tonight, Julian Castro.
Good evening and welcome to our Conversation with the Candidate series. I'm Adam Sexton. Our guest this evening is former Housing and Urban Development Secretary Julian Castro. Tonight we'll be getting to know Secretary Castro and where he stands on key issues. At the start of the show, I'll be asking the candidate some questions, and then after a break, we'll have our studio audience ask their questions in a town hall format. But before we begin with that, let's take a quick look at the candidate's biography. Julian Castro was born in San Antonio, Texas in 1974 and raised on the west side of the city. He graduated from Stanford and got his law degree from Harvard before working for a law firm in Texas. In 2001, he became the youngest member of the San Antonio City Council. He founded his own law practice and became mayor of San Antonio in 2009, getting reelected twice. Castro delivered the first keynote address by a Latino at the 2012 Democratic National Convention. In 2014, President Barack Obama nominated Castro to be Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, and the U.S. Senate later confirmed him as the 16th Secretary of HUD, a position he held until 2017. Castro then joined the faculty of the LBJ School of Public Affairs at the University of Texas. He has also written a book about his life called Waking Up from My American Dream. Castro is married, has 2 children, and has an identical twin brother, Joaquin, who is a congressman from Texas. Secretary, thank you for joining this evening on Conversation with the Candidate.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, as we noted, you served in the Obama administration, and it's safe to say that if you're elected president, you'll return to some of the policies that he had during his tenure there. So how do you convince people who voted for Donald Trump in 2016 but might be reluctant to do so again that they're better off by reversing course?
I would say, number one, that people want a president in the next term who is trying to bring the country together instead of trying to tear them apart. Somebody who has demonstrated integrity and honesty in public service instead of the ethical cloud that hangs over this administration. They want a president who's going to be a president for all Americans, not just a president for 37% that this president considers his base. And I fundamentally believe when we're talking about jobs, when we're talking about health care, when we're talking about education, growing our economy, that people want a president who is focused on making the country better in the future, not on making the country anything again and taking us backward. I'm that candidate that will take us into the future.
You've had time now to digest the Mueller report and the politics around it. Do you believe Congress should impeach the president?
I believe they should. The Mueller report pointed out 10 instances, 10 individual instances in which the president tried to obstruct justice. And it's very clear from that report that Bob Mueller essentially put that into the hands of Congress. Now, Democratic leadership in Congress is saying that what they're going to do is subpoena Bob Mueller, hear his testimony, and also do more inquiry, which is fine. I believe at the end of that inquiry, basically what they're going to get to is the same point, that there were 10 different instances where this president tried to obstruct justice. So the question becomes, are you going to hold this president accountable? Are you going to hold him accountable to the rule of law? And I believe that that he should be. Now, some people have said, well, that may not make sense politically. What I say is that we can walk and chew gum at the same time. I'm going out there, and there are 19 other candidates that are going out there every single day talking to the American people about how we can create more jobs in the country, how we can ensure they have better health care, that their kids have a better education. We can articulate a strong, positive vision for the future of our country and also make sure that, that we hold Donald Trump accountable.
The economy is doing very well right now, and New Hampshire has one of the lowest unemployment rates in the nation. You would obviously bring some different economic...
Well, let me just stop you there, Adam. A couple of days ago, I was in Las Vegas, and I went to Las Vegas, and I visited this storm drainage tunnel that runs underneath the Las Vegas Strip. There are thousands of people who are homeless underneath this tunnel, right? The irony of hundreds of millions of dollars worth of casinos sitting on that strip, and then underneath that, thousands of people who are homeless. And to get to your point, there are a lot of people who are not doing well right now in this country. We have a lot of income inequality. We have a lot of poverty out there that under this administration is simply not being addressed because Donald Trump is telling us that everything is good for everybody, which is not true.
How would your economic policies, though, make the economy better?
Number one, I would invest in empowering everyday Americans to succeed. in better education for their children, in universal health care, so they don't have to worry about not being able to afford health care if they don't have a job or if they lose their job. Also, investing in things like better apprenticeship programs, job training programs throughout the country, including in rural America, so that people have a better opportunity to get a job. Those types of things that don't leave anybody behind. And in addition to that, I would turn around the last 40 years of the tax code that has asked less and less of people at the very top and of big corporations, and has asked more and more of the middle class and the working poor, so that there's more balance in this country.
The bus is getting pretty full on the Democratic field right now. A lot of people running for president. You're on the younger end of the spectrum here. Do you think generationally it's time for America to look to new leadership that doesn't involve perhaps septuagenarian white men?
Well, I have to confess that I'm 44 right now, and I would be 46 on Election Day. I never thought that I would be the fourth youngest person running in this race. But even if I weren't running, what I do hear out there right now is that people want a new generation of leadership. They want new blood in Washington. They want new ideas. And so I do think that what you're going to see is, as this campaign goes forward, that more people gravitating toward a new generation of leadership.
Secretary Castro, this was the easy stuff. Now it's time to head over for the town hall.
Thank you.
We appreciate your time here. And coming up after the break, we'll bring our studio audience into this conversation. Stay with us.